Welcome to the Hope Natural Health Podcast. I'm Dr. Erin Ellis, your host. On this show, we discuss all things health, hormones, and happiness with a little side of this thing called life. Dr. Jack Wolfson is a board-certified cardiologist, best-selling author, husband, and father, and the nation's #1 natural heart doctor. For over 2 decades, more than 1 million people have experienced the transformational power of his care and strategies on natural heart health, originating from his Scottsdale, Arizona practice. He is named one of the America's top functional medicine doctors and is a 5-time winner of the Natural Choice Awards as a holistic MD. His book, The Paleo Cardiologist, The Natural Way to Heart Health, is an Amazon #1 bestseller. I am very excited to connect with Dr. Wolfson today. I heard about him when I first started out as an ND when I was working at the Holistic Urgent Care in North Scottsdale, because his practice is in Scottsdale, so we would refer all the time over there for some natural cardiology cases, and he's been in practice since 2012, he just told me, and has a lot of naturopathic medical doctors on his team. So welcome to the show, Dr. Wolfson.
Thank you so much, Dr. Erin. It's a pleasure to be on, and excited to share info about health and wellness. Listen, I started off as a cardiologist in the biggest group in the state of Arizona in 2002, and I was with the biggest group in the state of Arizona for 10 years as a hospital-based cardiologist. Along the way, I would meet the woman who would become my wife, who is a doctor of chiropractic. She opened up my eyes to real health and wellness. So I would leave that big practice in 2012 and then start Natural Heart Doctor, and puts me in touch with amazing people like you. So thank you again.
Yeah. So touch a little bit more about how did your journey begin and why did you want to become a cardiologist?
Yeah, I like to say that I was born into the medical matrix. My father was a cardiologist, so I'm in my mother's womb in 1970, and I'm listening to my father talk about cardiology talk with my mother, or maybe his colleagues and stuff like that. So ever since I can remember, I wanted to follow exactly in my father's footsteps as a cardiologist, and that's exactly what I would do. So after 10 years of medical training, including cardiology fellowship, I would, graduated as a conventional cardiologist in 2002. And as my career was taking off, it wasn't going so well for my father. And my father started off with depression in his mid-50s, and that morphed into a Parkinson's-like disorder. And then ultimately, he was diagnosed at the Mayo Clinic with progressive supranuclear palsy, PSP. And they said, we don't know what's causing this. We don't have any treatment for this, and he'll be dead on average within 3 years. And simultaneously and serendipitously, I get introduced to this 29-year-old chiropractor, and she's got all the reasons why my father is sick and dying. So Mayo Clinic has no reasons, and here are the chiropractors. She's got all the reasons. So what she said made absolutely perfect sense. I started to change my personal life. I started to change my career. She was very inspirational in that, of course, in saying that if you want to avoid the fate of your father or similar, you will change, because I was exactly in his footsteps. Ultimately, I did make those changes, and we would quickly get married, have 4 children. Now we've got the 4 children, 6 goats, 18 chickens, a couple cats, and a dog. So it's really been a fantastic journey. My father did die after 3 years, exactly like they said. It was a cruel, tortuous death. And, but listen, his loss will not be in vain. His loss created the man I am today, the doctor I am today. And for that, I'm forever grateful.
Oh, well, I'm super sad to hear about your dad. But like you said, he's an inspiration now for what you do. So that's awesome. I love hearing the stories about how we get to where we are today, and even like more so from the conventional medicine, a little bit more to the functional and holistic side is what I really love hearing. But you mentioned, you have quite the farm in Scottsdale, which is exciting because it's not the best climate for all that. But let's talk about how diet really plays a role, especially organ meat, which is kind of a buzz term lately. People are like, oh, should I take organ supplements? But let's talk about how that can play a role in promoting heart health.
Yeah, most certainly. And to be candid, right, we live in the mountains of Colorado. So our office is down in Scottsdale.
I do a lot
of virtual whole thing, and so do our other doctors. We do have another cardiologist on staff, and as you mentioned, 2 naturopathic docs, an anti-aging specialist, and a team of health coaches. But we live in the mountains. That's where the goats are and the chickens and stuff like that.
That makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, Scottsdale, it does exist, but it is pretty hot in the summertime. But listen, to get into the food story, right? I would like to start off with this, in that we all debate what are the best foods, right? We talk about, should we go vegan, vegetarian, paleo, keto, carnivore? I like to tell people the most important thing is to eat organic food, to get the chemicals out of our food, get the pesticides, phthalates, parabens, the GMOs, artificial colors, sweeteners, flavorings, get those out of the foods. That's paramount. We all agree on that. And then after that, certainly I'm a big fan of wild seafood, wild salmon, sardines, anchovies, clams, oysters, shrimp, lobster, crabs, scallops, salmon roe, like the fish eggs. All that stuff is just spectacular food. And then you mentioned the organs, and our ancestors ate organs. They prized organs. Really, if they killed an animal, like every member of the tribe got a little piece of the liver and the heart and these other organs. And I think that is fantastic advice. The liver, especially of something like a grass-fed bison, free-range bison, it's all the vitamins, minerals, proteins, fats, that makes that organ function. It's phenomenally healthy. So love eating the organ cuts. And then the last, I guess, fourth thing out of all that would be is that we avoid gluten. I don't see any role for any gluten. There's no health-related benefits of eating gluten. So our ancestors did not eat wheat, barley, and rye, certainly our Paleolithic ancestors. So it's something that we avoid as well. And I think it gives people the best outcomes. And of course, this is total anathema to how I grew up and how my father, lived his life. So a lot of people ask me, because I know you know this, Doc, that, how did a doctor like you and me, become, holistic? Typically, it's you enter this profession because something happened to you and the medical community couldn't figure it out, or to one of your family members and the medical community couldn't figure it out. And people ask me, they're like, well, do you feel better now than when, before you started living this way? And I say, I felt good when I was 30. And I feel good when I'm 53. But I don't, and why do I do this? Because I don't want to die like my father did of a Parkinson's-like illness at 63. I've got young kids, I want to live. I got a lot I want to accomplish. So that's why, I follow this particular way of eating.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So, and that's pretty easy. Eat organic, add some organ meats, and avoid gluten. It's really not complicated, right? You don't have to go on any diet and do the carnivore, the paleo, the keto. It's just if you follow that, you are avoiding a lot of the chemicals and the endocrine disruptors that are really wreaking havoc on our health in general, not just our heart, right?
Yeah, most certainly. Plastic, recent study came out about plastic where they took people who were undergoing a procedure called a carotid endarterectomy. So they removed the plaque in the artery of the neck, and they looked at it under a microscope. And they looked at it, and what they found is that 2/3 of the people had evidence of microplastic, little plastic particles inside of their plaque. 1/3 of the study group did not have that. It's actually surprising when you think about how ubiquitous plastic is in society. Mm-hmm. But the group with plastic in their arteries had triple the rate of heart attack, stroke, and dying over a 3-year period, which makes plastic a bigger risk factor than smoking, obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure combined times 3. It's not even close compared to plastic. So you're right. It's just, getting clean food, I think, is paramount. Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of ancestral eating. Our ancestors did it that way since the dawn of human existence.
Yeah.
We are meat and seafood eaters. We eat clean. We did not have grain. It's and I think a lot of times too, Doc, I'll wrap it up with this, where it's like, really focus on, these are the foods I want to get into my diet. And if you focus on getting these in. Like, how am I going to eat seafood today? How am I going to eat organs today? How can I get, plenty of green leafy vegetables? How can I get some nuts and seeds? Like, if you focus on eating those, then there's not too much room left over for ice cream and cookies and cupcakes and other, crap.
Yeah. When the plastic, that's fascinating about the carotid artery. And I was just listening to another podcast today, but they said in there too that we eat about a credit card worth of plastic. I think it's like there's so much plastic in our, even getting organic vegetables in, the plastic containers from like Trader Joe's, it's still plastic. It's so hard to avoid. And I'm super jealous of, where you live and you can grow. You probably have crops and I would assume some vegetables too with the animals. But yeah, it's, I don't live in a climate where I can do that, but I would love to just grow my own food and avoid the plastics because they're horrible for us and they're everywhere.
Well, Arizona, your growing season is actually a lot longer than it is here in Colorado. So hashtag no excuses. And even if you're just doing like your own herbs and spices and some minimal things, that'll be beneficial. But, listen, plastic is, again, it's all over everywhere. Every breath we take is going to have some compound related to plastic. It's just everywhere.
Yeah.
But to the best of our ability, we try and avoid. And then, of course, you just have to do everything else, that you can control. You can, control ideally when you sleep and sunshine exposure and physical activity, some of the other toxins, mitigate plastic in air, with air purifiers and other, detox strategies that we can talk about, for plastic and others. But, one big offender, for example, picture, walking into your local grocery store and they've got a container of salsa. Right? So they got a container of salsa and you're going to buy this pre-made salsa and it's in a plastic container. You're done. I mean, that is going to, all the acids from the tomato are going to dissolve that plastic into the food. All the plastic water bottles, like it's impossible to avoid in total, but we definitely can do our best. Plastic clothing. I mean, what is polyester? That's plastic clothing. Even, cans are lined with plastic, BPA or not, whether it's BPA free like that. BPA free tells me that means that there's another plastic that's in there that doesn't contain bisphenol A that might be as dangerous or worse, than the BPA itself. So it's impossible to totally avoid, but that's not a reason to bury your head in the sand. You just have to continue to do your best to minimize the exposure.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can't live in a bubble. Let's chat a little bit about cholesterol and statins. So I run cholesterol on everyone, as I'm assuming, most functional medicine NDs do. And a lot of times they're like, oh my gosh, my cholesterol is so high. Do I need a medication? And in the conventional medicine world, it's like you have high cholesterol, you get a statin. So what is your stance on statin drugs and why you advocate for natural alternatives than the statin?
Well, I'm 100% anti-statin. I've not written prescription for statin drugs in over 10 years. I think they're absolute poison and they don't work. So that's about as an emphatic of a statement against statins that I can really come up with. The cholesterol theory, cholesterol hypothesis is built on a foundation of lies. It is all pharmaceutical companies speak to vilify cholesterol. I talk about this chapter 1 of my book. Chapter 1 is called Cholesterol is King or Queen, because I want people to understand that it is. It's that important. It's why all animal species have cholesterol, why cholesterol is in eggs and cholesterol is in mother's milk and all mammalian milk. There's a reason for it. And it's just this miraculous particle that, of course, when the sun hits cholesterol in the skin, turns it into vitamin D. Everyone knows that's good. Our digestion is predicated on cholesterol and bile salts. All of our hormones in one way, shape, or form are derived or impacted by cholesterol levels. Cholesterol is part of the cell membrane, the cell fence that provides structure to cells and decides what gets inside of cells, what stays outside of cells. It's very, very, very important molecule. Now, as it relates to blood levels, Mr. Fit trials showed us that the sweet spot of total cholesterol is 160 to 260. Above 260, higher risk of dying. Below 160, higher risk of dying. So we want to somehow hit the sweet spot, but we don't want to do it with chemicals. We want to do it by eating and living like our ancestors did. And I think a lot of times, too, that cholesterol elevation is a sunshine deficiency syndrome, meaning that if we don't get enough sunshine, therefore we don't convert cholesterol into vitamin D. Vitamin D is low and cholesterol, it would be elevated. Get in the sun and reverse that. Vitamin D goes up, cholesterol levels naturally go down, everybody's happy.
So why do you think, or why do you believe statins are poison?
Well, I mean, again, I guess, how does one define poison? Well, poison, I guess, would be something that causes injury or interferes with normal bodily function. So statin drugs do that, right? They inhibit the HMG-CoA reductase enzyme. And in doing so, cholesterol levels, your body is not able to make cholesterol from the food that we consume because it shuts off that enzyme. The other thing that enzyme shuts off is the production of CoQ10. Pretty much everybody knows that and understands that. When you shut down the enzyme, you stop making heme A. Heme A is a structural protein found in cytochrome C oxidase, the fourth component of the electron transport chain. That seems pretty important. I want to inhibit my energy production, cellular water production, of which happens inside the electron transport chain. Dolicol. Dolicol is a steroid-like molecule that is very beneficial. It's found most commonly in the midbrain, in the substantia nigra. And that dolicol being there, substantia nigra, when you reduce those levels from statin drugs, I think what's going to happen is that you're going to see a lot of problems, movement disorders, Parkinson's, PSP like my father had. And you do see that. There are plenty of reports that talk about increased risk of statin drugs, and movement disorders. Statin drugs, the majority of them contain a fluoride atom in the molecular compound. So pretty much, most people, certainly in the holistic space that are listening to this, they, I don't use fluoride. We don't put fluoride in the water. I filter the water to get the fluoride out. I don't use any kind of, toothpaste or dental treatments that contain fluoride. Yet the statin drug does. So there. And then those, I guess, would be the side effect category. But the question is really, is there benefit? And the most recent meta-analysis, 2022, many trials looking at statin drugs, what they found is that there is a very minimal heart attack and stroke reduction, very minimal benefit regarding mortality. So the benefits are just way... it's just all propaganda for the pharmaceutical industry to sell. The number one selling drug of all time is Lipitor, and and really I think where you and I come from is that it's not about how do we reduce our risk of having a heart attack on an annual basis from 2% to 1.8%. It's about how do we get as close to 0% as possible. We know they don't offer it, and I think we do.
Absolutely. Thank you for explaining that. What are some big misconceptions about heart health in our current medical system?
Well, certainly the idea that, again, we're just relying on the pharmaceuticals, whether we're trying to rely on statin drugs, we're trying to rely on aspirin, we're trying to rely on blood pressure drugs. Those are all going to be just major fallacy right there. People who take high blood pressure drugs, they're in trouble. They better come up with a plan to get off of it. So, for example, if someone, if my blood pressure is 120 over 80 and someone else has a blood pressure of 120 over 80, but they're on 3 pharmaceuticals to do so, we are not at the same risk. The person on the pharmaceuticals is at a much, much, much higher risk of heart attack, stroke, and dying. So that needs to be crystal clear. So the objective there is always reduce. The other thing I'm not a fan of, I guess, as I'm thinking off the top of my head, I'm not a fan of CT scans. I don't think that CT scans have any benefit, yet everybody seems to be getting them. Hospitals love to promote it because it's what they call like a loss leader. So you can offer like this free scan, get the results, and then now boom, you got a patient for life, and there's a lot of downstream profit that's made from that. CT scans are radiation. Radiation causes heart disease and cancer and dementia. So,
Mm-hmm.
not a fan of radiation exposure. And then, whenever you get a test, is it going to change your plan? So, if you say, well, if my score is 0, then I won't take a statin. If my score is high, then I will take a statin. Then I guess that test would benefit you. I'm not going to prescribe a statin. That test doesn't help me at all. And really, if you've got the worst coronary artery disease in the world, but you're not having any symptoms, the goal really is to A, prevent the progression and therefore worsening of symptoms, and B, you want to prevent plaque rupture or erosion of the plaque leading to an acute myocardial infarction, heart attack. FYI, statin drugs increase coronary calcification, so you can't get a calcium scan and then say, I'm going to start a statin drug and then repeat the scan a year from now, because the scan on average is going to look worse on a statin drug, and that's clear from the medical literature as well. So
Yeah,
a couple different things there.
awesome. So I have a lot of patients that come to me and they're like, oh, I'm so worried about my cholesterol, my heart health, because heart disease runs in my family. What would be your best advice for those that are worried about the familial risk, even with they pawn their high cholesterol off on genetic, and it's like, oh, well, high cholesterol runs in my family, I'm fine, even though their cholesterol is really high. What would you say to that audience?
I want to say that family history and genetics are two different things. Genetics is based on is our DNA, and our DNA is the architectural drawings for our bodies, for the way that we make proteins. Essentially, is what our genes code for, is all these different proteins. And our genetics are perfect. Our genetics are perfect. We have evolved over a long period of time, or created in the image of God, whatever somebody believes is up to them. But however we got here, we're perfect. Until man-made poisons, and I'm blaming the men on this one because the majority of the poison is related to men because they created it. The man-made poisons impact our genes, and that's what's called epigenetics, and that's how disease happens. But when we can run and jump and see and feel and make babies, like we can do some pretty amazing stuff, why would anyone think we are genetically programmed to have a heart attack or cancer or a stroke or dementia? We're not. Our genetics are perfect. Genetic is a cop-out. Medical doctors love to use it because when they say it's your genetics, that implies there's nothing you can do about it. Therefore, you got to take their pharmaceuticals. Genetics are different than family history. Family history is true in the sense of I eat and live like my father. So if I developed progressive supranuclear palsy like my father, it's not because we've got the PSP gene. There is no such thing. But if I eat and live and think like my father did, I'm likely to get the same disease that he did. So, and I'll wrap it up and say things like this. 100 million Americans are labeled with high blood pressure. Do they all have bad genetics? There are 50 million people with coronary artery disease in the United States alone. Do they all have bad genetics? I mean, this makes no sense. So
Yeah.
hopefully, and again, you can change your family history just by eating and living and thinking differently than your family did, right? Work with doctors like you, Dr. Erin, doctors who are actually going to help people. I think one of the biggest risk factors for disease and sickness is being under the care of a conventional medical doctor.
Yeah. And giving into the pharmaceutical industry, which that's where you get those drugs from. How do you approach anxiety and depression naturally, especially in the context of heart health?
Well, everything we view through the lens of the 100-year heart method. And that would be, so if somebody said to me, how would you go after anxiety? How would you go after depression? How would you go after lupus? Or how would you go after sarcoidosis? Whatever that medical label is, it's just a sign that people are sick. And the 100-year heart method helps to address things under the premise of what we say: thrival nutrition, thrival lifestyle, Thrival Biohacking, Thrival Ultra Diagnostics. So the nutrition category we talked about, and that's going to help anxiety, depression, etc., because you're giving the body what it needs, take away what it doesn't. Those omega-3 fatty acids that come from seafood are pure brain food, pure brain food. So that's the nutrition side of things. From a lifestyle standpoint, sleep, sunshine, physical activity, avoidance of all the toxins that we talked about, like plastic, but a big one there is mold and bacteria from water damage. Highly, highly, highly detrimental to mental, emotional, and physical health. And then you got this whole, part of Thrival lifestyle, which is that Thrival mindset, or maybe we would call that, how we think well. Find your happy. If you're anxious and depressed, find your happy. Recover your spirituality. Self-acceptance, gratitude. Find your tribe. Find like-minded people to you. Social isolation is rampant. It's a big problem. So again, like resonating with your tribe, working with your tribe, again, finding your happy is critical. People who suffer from childhood trauma, major risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So addressing childhood trauma, PTSD, major risk factor for cardiovascular disease. So, when you eat well, you live well, you think well, and then like you guys do in your office, you do the most advanced testing in the world. You find out all the bad things about someone, all the good things about someone in their testing, blood, urine, stool. And then you try and move all the things from the bad category to the good category. And then you can use what I call Thrival Biohacking, which is this combination of supplements on one side. And then on the other side of Thrival Biohacking are some of those more biohacking conventional things you think about, like sauna, red light therapy, ozone, hyperbaric, methylene blue, so many different things that people could do. But that really is what we really want to do is the foundational things of the eat well, live well, think well. And then you start getting into the testing and the supplements and the biohacks. Time and a place for pharmaceuticals when things are really out of control. But the goal is to always reduce and eliminate those pharmaceuticals. God bless the men and women who work in emergency rooms and trauma centers. But for the prevention, treatment, reversal of chronic disease, like the medical doctors have nothing.
Yep. Agree with that. Can you share, this is like my last big question, but can you share like a success story of a patient who thrived after adopting some of the things you've talked about today? I would love to hear from someone that came to you in a really poor condition to thriving.
Yeah, well, obviously, after 12 years in the business, in the holistic space, I do have a lot of great stories. But let me just maybe use this opportunity to go after mold, where, a woman comes to see me and she's got extreme brain fog and she's got fatigue and she's been having chest pains. She's got all these different complaints going on. Yeah, she actually thought she had myocarditis after a COVID shot. She only got the COVID shot because she is immunocompromised and thought, okay, if I get COVID, I'm going to die. Therefore, I got the shot. And she came in to see me because she thinks she's got myocarditis. And I said, and I started asking her all these questions. And it becomes very clear to me that her home is water damaged and she's living in mold. And I said, I don't know if you have myocarditis or not. And frankly, for this discussion, it doesn't matter. I need you to do the following. 37 years old. I said, you're going to go and you're going to rent a hotel room in a new hotel. Now, the new hotel is going to have chemicals, right? But, the chemicals, the off-gassing, all that stuff is all bad, but it doesn't have the deliberate intention to harm. Mold does. Mold is a living, breathing organism that has survival capabilities to it. And it releases these toxins. So I said, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go to that new hotel. You're going to strip naked at the door of the hotel room. You're going to walk through that door, jump into the shower, shower off, put on your brand new organic sweatpants from a company like Wear Pact, and start your life over. And that's exactly what she did. And she is well on the way to recovery. Now, because a lot of people, right, and you've heard this before, and they're like, oh, well, what am I going to do? Where am I going to move? And I'm not saying these things are easy, but I'm saying that they are answers. Like when you can buy a brand new tent, especially in Arizona. Like you can live outside in Arizona like the Indians did for thousands of years, the Native Americans, the indigenous peoples did. You can live outside and you will recover if you do. I'm not saying society is against it, and it's not easy. And a lot of times for people with extreme brain fog and emotional issues and sickness from that, it can be difficult. Maybe you can get help. Maybe you've got friend, family, and stuff like that. But anyways, lots of great stories in that arena. Women with breast implants, implant illness, having those removed, I think is great. Seeing those kind of changes, just so many different things. But a lot of times it's just kind of, by removing the pharmaceuticals, like pharmaceuticals, statin drugs don't make anybody feel better. Blood pressure drugs don't make anyone feel better. Aspirin doesn't make anyone feel better. Diabetes drugs don't make you feel better. These most common pharmaceuticals do not make you feel better. Invariably, they make you feel worse. So, it's like people feel better by working with doctors like you and I. So I appreciate the opportunity to share this stuff.
Yeah, this is great information. We could probably talk for another 30 to 60 minutes, but we'll wrap it up with one question I ask all my podcast guests. What would be your best or favorite health tip that you can share with the audience?
Obviously, as you can imagine, there's a lot of great things that you can share with people, but I'm going to say get outside. The more time you spend outside, the longer you live. All plants, all animals are outside in the natural light. It is only the human that sits inside all day long, all night long, rarely getting outside. And I think it's a big problem.
Unfortunately, we lost Dr. Wolfson right at the end, but it's okay. His tip was to get outdoors. Most animals, plants, living beings besides the humans are outdoors all day, and it is so important for our overall health. So that is his biggest health tip. I really hope that you found value in this. And Dr. Wolfson, I appreciate your time taking time out of your day to educate our audience here on heart health. So with that, I'll see you all again next week.